to go forth and explore the lighthouse for yourself. You never know. Hezekiah and his daughters may in fact make themselves known to you. And if they do, please let us know. Now this next story I have to tell you is much more recent, and it involves the Spencers of Volano Beach. Well, we're not actually sure if their last name was the Spencers, but we do know that they were three siblings who went by the names of Todd, Sarah, and Sally. Now Todd, Sarah, and Sally were very well-to-do and had a large mansion on Volano Beach. They would host weekly parties and invite all of their neighbors. They would have the best food, the finest wine, and dancing and music into the night. Anyone who was anyone wanted to be invited. But after a while, the guests there started to notice that something was off. You see, no one knew where the Spencers were from. If you asked Todd, he would just shrug and say, "Oh, up north." If you asked Sarah, well, she would just offer you another hors d'oeuvre. And if you asked Sally, she'd just ignore you and walk away. She wasn't one for conversation. Well, it was decided amongst the guests that as long as they kept being invited to these parties, who cared where the Spencers were from? After a while, though, Todd didn't show up to the party one night, and guests asked Sarah, but she just said, "Oh, he went north. He'll be back in a few weeks." A few weeks did pass, and Sarah didn't show up. Guests asked Sally where she went, and Sally said, "Oh, she went to visit relatives. She'll be back soon, don't worry." Now a few more weeks did pass, and neighbors noticed that the Spencer household still had all of its lights on and the music was still playing. But no one had received an invitation in quite some time. So who were the Spencers hosting? Were their neighbors suddenly not good enough? Well, like any good, put-out, annoyed neighbor, they called the police. When the police showed up, they shouted out to the Spencers, but they didn't receive a response. So their next course of action was to break in the front door. Once they did this, they began to explore the entire first floor, but they didn't find anything strange. That is, until they went to the second floor. You see, in the last bedroom, all the way in the back, tucked into bed, were 3 dead bodies. A coroner would later confirm that these bodies were Todd, Sarah, and Sally. But that's not even the strangest part. These bodies had been dead and rotting for over a year, about the time the parties had started. So who had been throwing the parties? Had they been hosted by ghosts? And why didn't anyone there smell the decaying flesh just above their heads? We may never know. Now your next photo opportunity is going to be down the road on your left. It's going to be the Casablanca Inn. It is a beautiful white building covered in lights and torches. Now, during the Prohibition era, the Casablanca Inn was run as a boarding house by a woman named Mrs. Bradshaw. During that time, Mrs. Bradshaw would often be visited by 2 men, but they would never ask for a room for the night. In fact, they would just sit out along the sea wall all night long. Can you imagine, though, the surprise on Mrs. Bradshaw's face when she found out that these 2 men were rum runners? Well, being a canny businesswoman and seeing a real opportunity here, she offered for them to operate out of her back room. This, of course, led the Casablanca Inn to be the most popular place in town. But with all the illegal rum running, this also meant that government officials liked to come down here. And coincidentally, the Casablanca Inn was their favorite place to stay. So Mrs. Bradshaw came up with a plan. When government officials were not in town, she would walk along her widow's walk at the very top. And that's where I encourage you to take your pictures, all along the top of the building. You see, she would walk up there with a lantern, signaling to the rum runners on the water that it was safe for them to bring in their illegal supply. But when it was not safe, the lantern would not appear. This, of course, meant that there were many depressed and sober individuals in the city that night. Now here at the Casablanca, on your left, many say that Mrs. Bradshaw fell in love with one of these rum runners, but one day he stopped coming back. To the end of her days, she would walk along her widow's walk at the very top with her lantern, letting him know it was safe to return. But I don't think she knows that she's died, because many who walk along our waterfront and even boaters out on the water have all spotted her lantern hovering above the Casablanca Inn. Perhaps she is still, to this day, signaling to her lover that it is safe for him to return to her and that she hasn't forgotten him. You never know. We are now arriving at our Castillo de San Marcos. Now, from 1821 to 1942, this was known as Fort Marion, and it was used as a military prison. It was under the command of one Sergeant Tuttle. Sergeant Tuttle, though, being well known for liking things spick and span, decided one day to have his men do some light housework. He decided to have them move the heavy brass and iron cannons around on the top gun deck. Just some light spring cleaning. Now, as they were pushing against one particularly heavy cannon, they began to hear some cracking noises. They kept pushing and pushing until the cannon fell through the floor. Thankfully, no one was injured, as everyone managed to jump out of the way. But now they were faced with a new challenge. You see, they had to retrieve the cannon and bring it back up to the top gun deck. Well, Sergeant Tuttle sent his men down, and they ran from room to room, exploring around, but they didn't find the cannon anywhere. They came back up to the brand new skylight and looked down. There was the cannon. It had fallen into a secret sealed chamber. This didn't deter Sergeant Tuttle any, and he sent his men down with sledgehammers and ropes, and they began to bust their way through the thick coquina walls. Now, as soon as they broke through, they were greeted with the scent of 1,000 roses, as if someone was trying to cover something up. Warily, they peeked inside, but they didn't see anything strange, only the cannon. They took their ropes and began to haul it up, but as soon as they lifted it off the ground, underneath they found bones. Bones of all shapes and sizes. So whose bones were these? And why would someone go through all that trouble to cover it up? Well, local historians have found us a story that may in fact be the answer. You see, in the 1700s, the fort was under the command of one garrison commandant Garcia Martin, and he was said to have a beautiful wife. And his first sergeant thought so too. In fact, they began a secret love affair. Well, I'm not sure how secret it was, as the two of them did disappear around the same time. Many believed that they had just run off to elope, but what if her husband had found out? What if he decided to lock the two lovers away together in the secret room to rot away until the end of time? If you ask the National Park Service, they'll tell you that the only bones that have ever been found here are animal bones. But I'll ask you this. Why would anyone go through all that trouble just to cover up animal bones? Well, that's for you to decide. Now, surrounded by all of this beautiful scenery, does anyone like stories about pirates? Yay! Oh, good. Does anyone have a favorite pirate?
Jack Sparrow.
Blackbeard, Jack Sparrow, Captain Morgan. Oh, yeah, that's usually a crowd favorite. Well, I want to tell you all about my favorite pirate. You see, in the 1600s, off the coast here, it was plagued with pirates, and their favorite prey was Spanish treasure ships. Now, an English pirate named Andrew Ranson was very good at capturing these Spanish treasure ships, but he became so bold that he, in fact, became careless and was captured off today's Volano Beach, that other island off to your right, connected by the Osceola Bridge. Now, his men were sentenced to hard labor, but the captain was to be made an example of. You see, he was sentenced to a public execution by way of garroting. Does anyone know what that is?
No.
No, it's an extremely excruciating way to die. You see, Andrew Ranson was sentenced to have a rope placed around his neck. That rope was then fed through a hole in a wooden post and tied off in the back of the baton. blood loss, and full-on decapitation. Naturally, wages were placed, and many believed that the pirate would make it till about the 5th or 6th turn. But by the first turn of the rope, Andrew Ranson remained eerily calm. By the 3rd turn of the rope, he began to have trouble breathing. By the 4th turn of the rope, his vision began to swim, and by the 5th, his face had turned bright purple. Now by the 6th turn of the rope, snap, the rope broke, and Andrew Ranson fell to the ground. A priest looking on exclaimed, "And as you've made direct eye contact with me, sir, you have volunteered for this next part as my priest. So please raise your arms in the air for me and repeat after me. Stop!" Loud enough for the entire tram to hear you, or we're not moving. Stop!
Stop!
We have seen a miracle!
We have seen a miracle!
This man shall be spared!
This man shall be spared!
Everyone give him a round of applause! Now the priest grabbed Andrew Ranson and took him off to our cathedral where he offered him sanctuary. This, of course, meant that government officials and the executioner were extremely disappointed. You see, they wanted to give the execution another go. But the church said no. Andrew Ranson can have sanctuary for as long as he
That's
desires.
a different ghost tour up there, isn't it?
He wanted his freedom. So he made a deal with the Spanish. He helped to finish the construction of our beautiful fort you see on your right. And he also helped to interrogate English prisoners. How ironic that an English pirate would help the very Spanish that tried to kill him. Well, to let you all know, and to let you in on a little secret, Andrew Ranson's descendants still live in St. Augustine. And isn't it crazy to think that their very existence upon this earth is all depending on a miracle? Or as I like to call it, a strange twist of fate. Now, friends, I am sorry to say that I have come to my last story for tonight, but for all of our children on board, this makes for an excellent bedtime story. During the Second Seminole War, the U.S. offered a truce to the great war chief Osceola. Osceola agreed that it was time for peace, gathered all of his men, and came here to our fort. Once he arrived, though, he found out that it was all a lie. He was quickly taken prisoner and thrown into a prison cell where he then became quite ill. He was given a doctor by the name of Dr. Frederick Whedon. Dr. Whedon said that Osceola's best chance of recovering was if he was to go north to Fort Moultrie in the Carolinas, where he could recover in a more temperate climate. As soon as the two of them arrived up there, though, Osceola died due to malaria and was brought back down here to be buried. Now, Dr. Whedon must have seen an opportunity to further his medical knowledge because he asked to be alone with the great chief's body. Once he pulled out his medical bag, took out his sharpest scalpel, and proceeded to cut the head from the chief's body. He covered this up with a beautiful ceremonial scarf, and no one was the wiser. The next day at the gravesite, when he was all alone, he reached into the coffin, pulled out the head, and placed it into his medical bag. Dr. Frederick Whedon would then proudly display Osceola's head in a jar on his desk at work. His patients were quite confused by this and really tried just to not ask any questions. It wasn't a pretty sight. Now, Dr. Whedon was well known for wanting well-behaved children, and he had many. In fact, if any of them misbehaved, he would send them to their room, place Osceola's head on their nightstand, and lock them in for the night with their brand new babysitter. It was said that he had the most well-behaved children in the entire city. And he must have wanted well-behaved grandchildren as well, because he ended up gifting the head to his eldest daughter on her wedding night. She didn't appreciate the gift and re-gifted it to a New York State medical facility. Now, we don't know why Dr. Frederick Whedon did this. Perhaps it was revenge for some ancestors or relatives that were killed in the First Seminole War. But what we do know, for all my children on board, is that all of your parents just got some brand new ideas. So I would encourage you to listen to them and listen closely. The end! Thank you so much, friends, for joining us tonight. Did you all have fun?
Yeah.
Wonderful! If you you captured anything strange or unusual tonight, do remember to post it with hashtag Ghosts Gravestones because we would love to see it too. If you had fun, do check out our sister Ghosts Gravestones tours throughout the country. We would love to have you again. And as a reminder, my name is Caitlin and your driver tonight was Sharky. Everyone say thank you, Sharky!
Thank you, Sharky.
He is now one step closer to getting his driver's license back!
Woo!
And more importantly, if you would like to avoid any curses, unwanted scare packages, or just to keep the ghosts from following you home, then I highly encourage you to give to our glass gratuity coffin, which is up here by me when you come to say good night. Don't worry, we'll keep all the crazy here, believe me. Now, friends, do look around you and make sure that you have all of your personal belongings and members of your party. We didn't lose anyone, right? Oh, good, not again. Now do wait for the trolley to come to a full and complete stop. Wait for the lights to turn on. Wait for the lights to turn on and to hear the bell. At that time, it will be safe to escape. And when I say escape, I literally mean escape. Escape backwards, as if you are escaping down a ladder. That is the safest way to do so, and we are all about safety here. So friends, truly, did you have fun tonight?
Yeah.
Did anyone see a ghost?
Don't know.
No?
Right there.
Well, then you'll just have to come back, I guess. Well, you never know, actually. Do check your photos 2 to 3 days later. Some of our ghostly friends have been known to make an appearance late. You know, fashionably so. Now, I think right here is good, Sharky.